Okay, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio, Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. The surreal. We'll start off with the surreal, Dr. Lopkin. And please help me with this. I need help in many ways. A Biden's inflation party. First of all, digging up what's his name again? What's his name? The singer. They did that for
Oh,
you've got
James
to.
Taylor,
Yeah,
yeah.
James Taylor digging him out of the mothballs. No creativity. Again, it's the Biden administration, obviously. But what do you think about? I don't understand, and I really do need help with this, and maybe some of our listeners might as well. Is why wouldn't you wait till the figure comes out? Did they just assume because gas prices are so much lower that it would just automatically be lower? I guess
I
that's
don't
what they had to assume.
I don't even know what they were thinking of. I don't think they should have waited till the numbers because when the numbers came out, then you had the chance that they were going to be higher than expected, which
Okay,
they
but doesn't
were.
it look
Yeah,
rather foolish? It's like having a send off party, whatever, for the Titanic, knowing that it's going to sink. I mean,
yeah,
he looked like a fool. Like,
it was
and then the stock market's imploding as he speaks.
stock market went down 1200 points
Significant.
while he was talking. Inflation numbers came out higher than expected. It's not like they didn't know the CPI numbers were coming out. These are scheduled, you have the whole year's calendar. Why they did not do this event Monday before the numbers came out so they could at least claim, well, the numbers were expected to be better. So, why they
Now,
would
see
do
that
it the same day as the
that's
CPI, I don't know.
yeah. I think we're saying almost the same thing. It just points whatever they Monday before after whatever. It just points to incompetence. Even the liberal media was just shaking their heads. Democrats, liberals are shaking their heads. It just reinforces the incompetency. And also, speaking of that, of the subject of incompetency, do you see Biden in Detroit when again he does the right hand handshake to nothing?
To nobody, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, more and more polls are coming out saying the American public do not believe he's competent. And this is a large number of Democrats also do not believe that Biden is competent anymore.
and also beyond competent, he's also an angry grandpa. I mean, he just yells, and then he does the whisper thing in Detroit. Does it can his hand maybe just beyond being handled at this point? No whispering. It's creepy, Joe. It's weird. It's like a bad
Yeah,
B movie.
he doesn't understand that he tends not to listen to people. He's very we've talked about this before. It's very obvious that he has suffered a mental decline in just the time he's been president.
Without a doubt, can I just interject real quick? I said it on a previous show, but obviously I have too much time on my hands, so I YouTubed the second debate, Trump Biden. Just I don't even know why, and I watched it for like 2 minutes. Even in 18 months, not that he was any kind of a Mensa candidate back then, he's exponentially declined. And 18 months is not even a blink of the eye.
Yeah, his I mean, and people are noticing. The polls have said the vast majority of Americans don't believe he's competent. And that's going to be a big problem in the midterms because if people are following his lead, Americans don't want that. And you're seeing that in a lot of swing states and a lot of close races where the Democrats thought they were going to have a walk, and now the Republicans have rebounded.
Yeah, that's really interesting point because you look at polls like in Pennsylvania when Fetterman inexplicably was double digit lead. He didn't even have to debate or even make appearances. Even CNN said he's got to come out and play now. It's only a 5 point Fetterman lead, which is the margin of error. And here's my little theory, Dr. Loughlin. I'd love your comment on this. I think these races are within the margin of error, like in Arizona as well, and in other places. It really favors the Republicans because things like we're going to get possibly the largest rate hike in Fed history next week, and there's going to be more Biden gas. Meaning, if you look at the next 2 months, the margin of error or the margin of f ups are certainly in Biden's favor. I mean, every hour is another opportunity for a screw up, is it not? And it impacts. I mean, these polls just didn't narrow. It was a 11, 12 point lead in Pennsylvania. Same within Ohio. And with Ohio, I'd love your comment on this. Ryan, of course, the tolerant Democrats and how radical the MAGA is, said that essentially MAGA people should be rubbed out. I think that's a blunder he's not going to be able to recover from. What do you think?
No, I think that was his moment. That was his deplorables
A
moment.
no doubt question, no doubt.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to see the highest rate hike in Fed history. I seriously doubt they'll raise it more than 1 point, which they did last time. Um,
But it's
but
going to
you
be a significant one. I
it
may have
it's
misspoke
oh
about
it's
maybe history, but it's certainly going. I mean, all these things have an impact on the electorate. I mean, it's going to have an immediate impact on getting car loans. Not that there's any cars available, and it also shows, it tells people, even if the less than fully informed, that there's something there. You can have all the parties on the White House lawn, but we're on the Titanic, economic Titanic, that is.
yeah, it's going to have an impact. Um, Again, the Fed will probably raise rates either 75 or 100 basis points, especially given the bad inflation numbers that just came out. But what you're talking about with these candidates closing the gap is actually brought up by the New York Times and their polling guru stated that Democrats should be very worried because, according to all of these polls, the places where Democrats are leading by the most are the same areas that the polls got very wrong in 2016 and 2020. And we know we've talked about this, for years. I've spoken to folks that do these polls, and the methodology hasn't changed. So these polls have always undercounted Republicans to the point where in 2016 and 2020 there were big surprises by how well Republicans did. And now these same areas are the ones that Democrats are going, oh, it's okay, we've got this. It's like, no, you can't assume that.
Okay, but let me ask you this question. It's becoming there's more information on candidates like the senatorial incumbent in Georgia. Fetterman is being pretty out there on the left. I think that's a factor, but it still doesn't attribute to the closure, does it? I mean, these people had, especially in PA, they had a he had a huge lead, Fetterman, and in
Well,
Ohio, Ryan had a fairly good 5 6 point lead. Now, actually, JD Vance is ahead.
well, Fetterman's got a unique problem because
He's got many
as
problems.
as as I'm sure our listeners know, Fetterman had a stroke
Yep.
and he has been essentially campaigning from the basement the same way Biden did during COVID. Now, even liberal pundits, CNN, the Washington Post, have come out and said, no, you've got to prove to the electorate that you are actually capable after your stroke of being senator. And the big problem is now he's agreed to a single debate,
Yeah,
but
October 25th.
right, that debate comes more than a month after early voting starts. So there's going to be a lot of people who are casting their votes, and then they'll see the debate. And if they see, oh, wow, he's really not capable of doing this, it's too late if they've already voted for him.
This whole early voting, I think you're talking about undermining democracy as our Speaker of the House would always say, Fancy Nancy. That is, to me, is undermined because you're not really allowing candidates and the electorate to see the whole picture. I mean, what if someone, so everyone votes, I don't know, October 29th, and then someone comes out and says, yeah, they're for there's some racial slur, or more than a slur, some racist ideology, or some crazy notion, or something comes out that I don't know, they had a criminal record. It really is ridiculous. I mean, it went from being military people, disabled people being able to vote early. Now, I think it undermines the electoral process. What do you think?
It really does. I mean, especially when you're talking about a 2-month
I
period
mean,
where
yeah,
people are
2 weeks,
able
something
to
fine.
vote. I mean, the amount of time that Pennsylvania has to vote is ridiculous. The simple fact of the matter is, the longer you allow early voting, absentee voting, the less stringent requirements you put on absentee ballots, these are all just opening the door for more election fraud. And it looks like that's what the Democrats really want.
Of course they do. They're experts at it. So yeah, but in terms of Fetterman, first of all, we talked about it last time 2 weeks ago. He is a good marketing phenomenon, but he always attacks Dr. Oz as being wealthy. At least Dr. Oz earned his money. This guy was sitting around till he was 45 in his parents' basement. I mean, really? And he puts on his shtick about he's all, Mr. Hard Ass. He's a little trust fund wussy boy, really.
Yeah, it's amazing how many Democrats are either married into it, inherited it, but they don't think that that matters. But if a Republican has that kind of money,
Like Bush.
that's an issue. Right. That's
Yes.
suddenly an issue.
Well, speaking of,
It's
I
like,
this
no, no,
is
no.
really this is really on a tangent, but I saw speaking of people that were born into it and are just pretty stupid. I'm sorry to say this. I know she's royalty. Carolyn Kennedy. I saw her on the stage with Biden. She's such a genius that she lost an election in Massachusetts. Yes, a real Mensa candidate. Again, born on third, thought
Well,
she hit her triple.
there were a couple of Kennedys that have lost
Yes,
elections in Massachusetts
that
now.
sticks over.
And I mean, all I can say about the Kennedys is I highly recommend our listeners watch the episode, and I'm trying to remember the series name. It's being aired by Fox Nation, and it's very much like The Men Who Built America. It's They're talking about different dynasties, and they have an episode dedicated to the Kennedys, and you see how this dynasty was manufactured and the criminal enterprises that they were involved in.
Oh, the Joe Kennedy was a bootlegger.
Yes.
So yeah, interesting. Anyway, we'll see how that works. I think we've done predictions on this show many times. I was very very apprehensive about 3 weeks ago. I knew that the House was going to go red. That's just almost a done deal, pretty much a done deal. I was very skeptical about the Senate. I'm a lot less skeptical. I think we could get a two-seat majority, or at least the Republicans, I should say, would have a two-seat majority. How do you assess the situation now, at least in the Senate? Which is
Well, I mean,
critical because one thing, and it's another subject is, can you imagine the hearings that are going to happen when the Republicans take over? Biden. They even talked about General Miley Cyrus and how he's going to be grilled for all his screw ups. So it'll
well,
be an interesting time.
there will be a lot of those hearings are going to be done in the House, and the House is going to swing Republican. In fact, Chuck Schumer
Hmm.
told Democrats at a high level fundraiser that Nancy Pelosi's in trouble and the Democrats are going to lose the House. So when Schumer is saying the House is going Republican, the House is going Republican. So that's pretty much a done deal. The Senate, I think it's going to be very close,
Oh,
but
definitely close.
I think the Republicans are going to take it. Again, you're seeing the numbers get closer. The Democrats keep hanging their hat on the generic poll. What people don't seem to realize is that in um, in the first midterm election for Barack Obama, the generic poll favored the Democrats. All of the polls showed things might be close, but there was no indication of a red wave. And we know that was one of the biggest red waves in history.
Yes.
The polls, again, we know they swing Democrat. Again, the New York Times just came out and said, yes, we have Democrats have to be careful not to believe these pro-democratic polls.
And it's
I
also
think
something I said earlier, I think is still salient earlier in today's podcast, is that the margin of error is on the Republican side, meaning you
yes.
got the gas machine out there, you got economic, basically you got incompetency, and they're putting their heads in the foxhole because they know he's incapable of handling anything. And if something comes up, big interest rate hikes, the acknowledgement from that inflation is a huge issue. Let's say the numbers come out about economic growth. I mean, of course, the Republicans, leave it to them, can screw things up like they're doing now with proposed abortion legislation. My advice to them: will you shut up until the midterms, you stupid idiots?
Actually, I'm gonna disagree with you on
There you
that,
go.
because what Lindsey Graham did was he gave Hanover, because the Democrats have been out there saying the Republicans are going to ban abortions completely. They want to make sure nobody can have an abortion. By putting this proposed bill out, they have said they can now all point to, well, no, we're not going to ban abortions. We're looking at reasonable abortion laws. And by the way, the 15-week limit that was proposed by Lindsey Graham,
Is that of
40,
Europe?
48 out of 50 European countries have that same exact limit.
My only point to this is you're just you're bringing things. In other words, it was 4 months ago, 3 months ago when the decision was reached. I think it did it because we have our eyes on politics for in preparation for doing this podcast. I think it did influence the numbers. There's no look at the data. So just don't bring it up. I understand your point. You redefine it, you reposition it, but I think it's just something leave well enough alone for it. You got the momentum. Don't bring it up because the mainstream media is going to twist the story.
Well, the mainstream media twists every story.
There you
That's
go.
why
So
we
don't
have
give
a
them the
podcast,
opportunity.
you know.
Well, anyway,
but
switching Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
but talking about mainstream media, twisting stories, we're actually seeing a huge turnaround in that. CNN is getting rid of all of their woke reporters.
Oh, yeah. By
Politico,
the way, I don't know if you knew this. They just, I think it's a demotion. Don Lemon is now the morning show, which five people watch. My cat watches it once in a while. But other than that, so he's gone.
yeah.
Anderson
So,
Cooper, I think, is next. He's got less than 1 million viewers. You're
and
talking about
I
the
I
collapse of the
love
liberal media.
yes, Politico magazine was purchased, and I love the complaint that the liberals are making is that they are whining that now these outlets are going to be covering both sides of a story.
Isn't that awful?
Yeah, that's so terrible
I think it's a threat to democracy.
to tell an entire story and actually give both sides of an argument. Oh my God.
Did you see what CNN's doing to that point, Dr. Lopkin? They have a show, believe it or not, called Under Further Review, when they revisit the lies that were perpetuated by them over the last 4 years. I'm
Yeah,
serious. No, you can't make it up.
no, you
Like,
can't make this up. I absolutely love this because CNN and MSNBC led the charge. They spent 4 years saying, Trump colluded with Russia, even after the Mueller investigation said no, there was no collusion. Even though the entire world now knows the Steele dossier was fake, they still go, oh, no, he colluded with. It's time they paid the piper. I still say The New York Times and Washington Post should be required to return the Pulitzer Prizes they got for their coverage of the Steele dossier. But now you're seeing, oh, wait a minute. We really screwed this up. We have no credibility left. And when
You
the
see, well,
credibility
that
leaves,
you've
so
touched
did the
on the point.
viewers.
You touched on the point. It's not that they have well, they do have new management, but even the Washington Post, it's it's the bottom line. You can bullshit so much. You can lie, you can lie till you're blue in the face, right? But eventually you lose credibility, as we already know. So why the people do tune in, even though they have a particular political bias, but they don't want to be lied to. I do think MSNBC people actually do want to be lied to. They just love the love fest of insanity.
Yeah, MSNBC has gone off the deep
They're out,
end,
they're
but
out of their minds.
CNN, at least learned their lesson because yes, they had a very liberal audience, but even their liberal audience started going, you know what, this just isn't true anymore, and they were changing the channel because
Yes, I think you
CNN's.
have a good point about the CNN MSN. We'll just revisit that for 1 second. Is that I think CNN might have had a more liberal audience, but an audience that wanted information. I think
Yes.
MSNBC just in other words, just tell me you love me. Just tell me
Right.
sweet, whisper sweet nothings in my ear, no matter if it's true or not. That's
Well, I
the
I
deal.
think the big difference between the CNN audience and the MSNBC audience is that the CNN audience were long-term watchers. They started watching CNN when CNN was a bona fide news
Yes, very good
organization.
point.
And as CNN got rid of their reporters in favor of liberal pundits, this audience went, well, no, I mean, yes, we tend to vote more liberally, but we know this isn't true, so we're turning you off. MSNBC was never a real news organization, so the people watching there never got real
I
news.
would agree. But I wouldn't last thing because we need to move on. I do believe that Zucker and other losers, just people who got lucky in life. Let's just be honest. It was easy money. Okay. Instead of in other words, you're phoning it in. So what are we going to do today? Instead of doing some research, some investigative journalism, let's do Trump today. How about do some Trump, Trump, Trump? And it was easy money. It was ka-ching. Good
It was.
ratings. Trump was the axe murderer. Trump actually was the person involved in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Anything. It was all anything Trump.
Yeah, they took the easy way out. They were kowtowing to the liberal left to the point where they were actually just making things up. And it's not just media anymore because now we have to take a really close look at our educational institutions because Harvard just hired Brian Stelter as a professor.
Oh, you have to be kidding me.
No, I'm not. Brian
No, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Stelter
whoa,
was
whoa. What is he teaching?
I
Oh, is he a
I don't know.
consultant?
I don't know what he's going to be teaching,
Oh,
but yes, Brian
that's a
Stelter,
joke.
who was fired from CNN because he couldn't tell what a fact was,
That's
is
like
now
having someone being
teaching at
thrown out of the
Harvard.
Nazi party for cruelty. I mean,
Right. I mean,
it's ridiculous.
so yeah, Harvard hired him as a professor. And you've heard a lot about, oh my God, the liberal agenda in higher education. This is the perfect example. This is not somebody who should ever have been hired as a teacher.
Oh, a teacher never should have been hired as a news person. He was a
Well, yeah,
clown. He was a butt boy of Zucker. That's all it was. Okay, he was a suck up. So also speaking of the information, misinformation, the Durham report now has clearly identified Igor Danchenko as an FBI informant. Scary shit.
it is very scary. And for those of you who haven't seen all of the information and don't really know what that means, bas Dushenko was the one that put together the phony Steele dossier. So what this means is that somebody who was consulting for the FBI put together the phony dossier in order to rig an election. Taken to the next point, it means again, the FBI was corrupted and being used as a political organization.
Is corrupted.
Yes. And I mean, we've seen it with Mar-a-Lago. I mean,
This
I
scary shit though. This is
I
third
love
world banana republic shit.
it's like I love that the DOJ is fighting because they don't want a special master to, they don't want somebody who's impartial to
They don't
look
want
at
an
the
adult in the
documents
room.
right before they do. It's like the only reason to not have an impartial observer is because you're up to some shit.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, exactly.
That's
The only reason you don't want an impartial referee is because you're partial. There you go. Also, yeah. So I think that's very, very, very scary. Also, speaking of something that's scary, is Russia being really getting their ass kicked. And I never thought that. I mean, I knew it would be tougher, but there's a lot of ramifications from this. Number one, it's almost like the emperor has no clothes. I mean, the only thing Russia's okay, they had oil, I get it, but their economy wasn't really first rate. There was their military. It's being decimated by Ukraine. They're getting their ass kicked.
It is. And I mean, yes, it's a good thing that Russia is losing. The negative ramification for this, though, is that it's pushing Russia into China's arms. And this creates, if our listeners remember the George W. Bush phrase of the axis of evil, this is an alliance that puts the axis of evil to shame.
Yeah, no
And this
question about that. But is it? But let's just take one step at a time. That's geostrategic, and it has huge ramifications. I get it. But also, you're talking about a caged animal, Putin. There's getting growing domestic discontent, and as he gets, he's got a strong ego. He's an, uber male, so to speak. He could take it to another level.
Yeah, that's a distinct possibility. And
He
people
could
that
go out
know
gracefully.
Putin are very concerned about the idea that he will essentially burn the bridges behind him, scorched earth, and actually go nuclear.
I think that is, not to be an alarmist, that is a very much a
It
possibility. Will it happen?
it is
Probably not, but it's not something pie in the sky by any means.
no, it is at this point it is more of a possibility than it has been at any time in our lifetimes. And do firmly believe that there are people in Russia, in the leadership of Russia, who will stop him before it comes to that because
We
they
hope.
know once they launch a nuke, they're going to be decimated because that's the end of them. And they're going to want to save Russia. So I do believe there are people that will stop it on the Russian side before it comes to
I
that.
think you have an
But
excellent point. Wait,
we
hold
are
on. You have an
we
excellent.
are have the new
Go
we
ahead. I'm
have the
sorry.
doomsday clock ticking again like it hasn't since the height of the Cold War.
I would agree with that, but I think I love what you say because it's spot on. But I'm thinking I don't think when I think of what you just said, your analysis, I don't think full scale and then preventing it. I think even if he launches a tactical nuclear weapons in Europe, in the Ukraine, on the Ukraine, I think Russia becomes so alienated, so chastised that
Yes.
they disravel, unravel. So I think that's why they would pull the plug. They'd become a pariah that would make North Korea look like, Mary Poppins.
Absolutely. I think if they actually use a nuclear weapon, even if it's just a single dirty bomb, I think at that point, even their closest allies are going, "Oh, we're out.
That's a
We
little
got to
bridge too
distance
far. Yes,
ourselves." Yeah.
no doubt. Well, we'll see what happens there. I think it's very, very dangerous. We're living in a dangerous world, and we're living in a dangerous world with no one in the West at the helm. Let's be honest. Uh, Europe Western Europe is bankrupt, not just economically, morally, military. They're nothing of what they were. The days of, the imperialistic days, the glory days of Europe are well done. They're finished. It's over. Okay. In America, you have the clown, the head clown, and his jester in charge. So there's really no one in charge, and it's a very scary time. I mean, you look at the Cold War, and you look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, and you look at the Middle East, Yom Kippur War with Nixon. We were on the brink then. Gets underplayed, and certainly on the brink in the Cuban Missile Crisis. But you had Kennedy, you had Nixon, Nixon with all his flaws, brilliant people. They knew geopolitical strategy. You have the Colonel Clown in the. I mean,
The
and I also believe you had a strong leader in the United States. I'm not so sure. I don't even talk about that's an obvious. Putin wouldn't have invaded, but I think we would have had some brinksmanship that would have pulled this thing back. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, the big problem right now is that when we've come close in the past, Cuban Missile Crisis, height of the Cold War, all of these things, there was always an adult in the room.
Hmm.
And right now, the world, not just the country, the world does not have an adult in the room. And in fact, I've actually heard a number of pundits say when they were talking about the death of Queen Elizabeth that she was the last adult in the room.
No, I would certainly agree with that. And to that tragic event, I've heard few pundits, and I was fuel for thought for me is with her death. Is that possibly not the death of the royal family or the royalty in the UK?
There ha-
Was she the glue that held it together?
there has been a lot of talk about that. I think it's going to depend on what actions King Charles III takes. And I'm not talking about in terms of the future of Great Britain. I'm talking about how he deals with his immediate family. Because you have Prince Andrew, who we know was tied in with Jeffrey Epstein.
Hmm.
You have Harry and Meghan, who they're just trying to make a mockery out of the royal
The
family.
clown show, yes.
I think if Charles reins them in, and there are signs that he is starting to, because he's already told Harry and Meghan that their children will not have the His Royal Highness title. If he does this, if he keeps them under control, the British people as a whole do not want the monarchy to go away. It was now I've never been a big fan of the monarchy, but it was explained to me by a couple of people in Britain that the royal family is essentially the personification of the spirit of Britain. And
Hmm.
if the monarchy falls apart, a lot of their national identity is going to go with it, and they don't want to see that happen. So I think it's all in the hands of King Charles at this point.
Fantastic
Will he
analysis,
rein his
100%.
family in?
No question. He's got big shoes to fill. He's got a lot on
Yes.
his plate, and there's no question. Also, he has to battle wokeism within his own country as well. I mean, in the death, there's some of the horrific tweets and messaging in Britain about, she's an imperialistic whatever. She deserves not a silent death, but a horrible death. So he's going to have to battle that as well, as
Yeah, I
with
think
every
I
Western
think
country.
in terms of wokeism, I don't think he's going to have to do much to battle it because the new British prime minister
Yes.
is a conservative, and she is very much in the mold of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. So I think she's the one that's going to battle the woke
I
forces.
love that. She's the right leader at the right time. Uh, Great Britain needed that after decades of shit management. Excuse my language, but true. And she's also someone, God forbid, um, surprise is not anti-Semitic. Very pro-Israeli. In fact, she wants to have a Great Britain Israeli trade agreement.
Yes, and that's very
That's going to
important. Not
explode the heads in Europe.
Oh, absolutely. It is going to drive people crazy
Insane.
because they have been anti Semitic for so long, promoting anti Semitism through the BBC. Now we have, the woke squad here promoting anti Semitism. The fact that a strong leader is actually coming out against it, I think you're going to see a lot more moments like AOC crying on the House floor when the House overwhelmingly voted to provide Israel with defense.
Yes, I think that will be interesting to see. Speaking of other interesting things going on in our own country, yeah, I love this, and I think sometimes we do nail it, sometimes we don't. But I think our whole adage is liberalism and socialism is do as I say, not as I do, in many areas. Okay, but Mayor Genius Foot, I mean Lightfoot in Chicago, wants to declare a state of emergency for the few number of migrants coming into our city. And the funniest one is that DeSantis sending illegals to Martha's Vineyard. Talk about heads exploding. God, it's great.
Yeah, the liberals are going crazy, calling this a political stunt, and how dare
I
these
dare them
governors
do that.
manipulate the immigrants this way. But the fact of the matter is, these are people that announced, we support illegal immigrants. We are
Unbridled,
a
yes.
sanctuary city. And Lori Lightfoot went out saying, not only is Chicago a sanctuary city, but Cook County is a sanctuary county. And when Abbott sent a busload of, I believe it was 90 immigrants. They're dealing with thousands every
Thousands
day.
every day, yes.
90 of them went to Chicago. Lightfoot sent them out of Cook County to a small town which was run by Republicans, didn't tell them they were coming. This is not some place that declared themselves a sanctuary city. So talk about hypocrisy. It's great for them to say they're sanctuary cities until they actually have to live up to it.
Well, speaking of living up to what you say, and the whole adage that we've coined is liberalism is not do as I say, not as I do. Fancy Nancy Pelosi, you know that her stock performance outdoes Warren Buffett. I wonder how that happens. I think that's because she's a genius, a Mensa
Oh,
candidate.
yeah. It's called insider trading, and
And
others have
greed.
gone.
I thought
Yes,
greed was bad, disgusting. She said corporate bad, people good. I mean, in her eloquent way of saying things. So what's wrong, Nancy?
yeah, it is amazing how well her portfolio has done. And let's face it, it's because she only brings bills to the floor that she knows she can get passed. Well, if she knows she can get this bill passed, it means she knows the contents ahead of time. She knows whether or not it's going to pass, and her husband can then go trade on that knowledge.
But it also points to a highest level of hypocrisy plus unbridled greed. You're 85 years old. How much friggin' money do you need, you greedy bitch?
And let's not forget, she made all of this money while in office.
Oh,
She's not the only one. Bernie Sanders has become a millionaire,
multimillionaire.
while multimillionaire, while railing against millionaires.
It's a good business. It's good work if you can get it, Doctor Lopkin.
Yes, it is.
It's very good. And speaking of interesting little facts about our woke constituency, talk about Project Veritas. That's an interest right
Oh,
here in Little Connecticut.
Project Veritas released a video where they caught the assistant principal of a Coscob school stating point blank that he is only hiring teachers that will push a progressive democratic agenda. And it's not just enough that he wants to push that agenda. He stated point blank on the video that he will not hire anybody who's Catholic because they tend to be more conservative. He will not hire anybody over 30 because once you're in your 30s and 40s, you're too set in your ways, and he can't manipulate what they're going to tell the students. So he has admitted to discrimination of religion, age discrimination. Fortunately, this got out, and within, I believe, 24 hours, he was suspended.
He'll
But
be
the fact
rehired.
of the
Don't worry
matter,
about it.
oh, I'm sure when the heat dies down, he'll have his
He'll
job
resurface
back.
somewhere.
But the bigger issue of this is, if this is happening in Cos Cob, it is happening all over the state. And I find it absolutely hysterical that right after this video came out, Governor Lamont started airing campaign commercials touting how much money he spent on education and showing, oh, the Connecticut education system is number 3 in the country. No, it's not. But it is absolutely amazing how he tried to whitewash it so quickly before people could realize what the school system has been manipulated and how they're manipulating our children.
Unfortunately, he's going to win in a landslide, but that's for another show. We'll close in on My Son Hunter, which is
Ah,
I think a viral movie. But anyway, he's falling on a little bit of hard times. The gravy train has left the station, hasn't it, Doctor Lopkin?
yes, because now that the laptop has been verified and everybody knows that he was making his money by selling influence and selling access to his father,
The big
now
guy.
nobody, yes, the big guy, now nobody wants to do business with him. So now he's telling a court he can't afford to pay child support.
Are you sad? Are you crying, Doctor Lopkin?
I feel bad for his kid. I felt bad for his kid just being Hunter Biden's
Oh God,
child.
that's
But
bad enough.
how bad how much of a situation do you have to be in as a child to deal with the fact that your father is a famous coke and heroin addict, that he is a
And
criminal,
porn
that
addict
that a porn addict, yes,
who
and
actually had
now
sex
he's
with your brother's wife. We'll just throw
yes,
that in there for yucks.
with
Don't worry about it.
with his brother's wife, yes. This is your father, and now your father is telling the entire world, "Oh, I don't have money to care for my kid." It's like this, and you know what? This is not just a reflection on Hunter Biden. This is a reflection on the entire Biden family. Because if you're Joe Biden, this is your grandchild. You are going to say, oh, you're going to let this happen to your grandchild? Now, of course, Joe Biden, this is something else. The mainstream media has not talked about this. We mentioned months ago that Project Veritas had turned over a diary that was allegedly from Ashley Biden, Joe's daughter, to the FBI. Well, the FBI and the DOJ just convicted 2 people for stealing this diary. These are the folks that sent it to Project Veritas. They pled guilty to stealing the diary. Here's what the mainstream media has not mentioned. In order for them to plead guilty to stealing the diary, the DOJ had to accept that this actually was Ashley Biden's diary. They had to authenticate it. Well, as many outlets have reported, the diary talks about Joe showering with his then prepubescent daughter.
If that
This
was
is the
Trump,
Biden fact.
No,
This
no, the
is the
family is an
Biden
insane,
family.
corrupt family enterprise, criminal enterprise. It'll be interesting to see when if there are hearings when the Republicans take control of the House. That will be must see TV. Anyway, Dr. Lopkin, great show, and Carnivore and the rest of the media enterprise is doing quite well, isn't it, Dr. Lopkin?
Yes, you can find Carnivore Radio as well as the rest of the Xvadio podcast network at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
And thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Thank our listeners.
We'll see you next time.